68.030 of the Metropolitan Code of Laws. Notice is hereby given that a final hearing before the Commission is appealable to the Chancery Court of Davidson County or the Circuit Court of Davidson County via a statutory writ of certiorari. You're advised to seek your own independent legal counsel to ensure that your appeal is filed in a timely manner and that all procedural requirements are met. You should also seek independent legal advice regarding the applicability of the writ of certiorari to the specific decision of the Historic Zoning Commission. First, I'd like to approve the minutes from last month's meeting.
Move approval.
Have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. Last month's meetings are approved. First, at the consent agenda, items on the consent agenda will be voted on at a single time. No individual public hearing will be held, nor will the Commission debate these items unless a member of the audience or the Commission requests that that item be removed from the consent agenda. And we already know that 1217 Fifth Avenue North will be moved from the consent agenda. Are there any other from the audience from the consent agenda that need to be taken off? Okay. If not, so.
Need to read them?
Well, he's going to read them. So we'll go ahead, Fred, move on with that.
All right. Forest Avenue, which is an application for an addition and the demolition of non-contributing additions and accessory structures. 126 Windsor Drive, which is an application for an addition and demolition of an accessory structure. 1809 Sweetbriar Avenue, demolition of a non-contributing home. And 116 Mockingbird Road is an application for new construction of an accessory structure. Again, 1217 Fifth Avenue North has been removed from the agenda. All these items meet the guidelines for the districts in which they are, and staff recommends their approval.
Any questions to staff? Okay. We've already talked about public hearing. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, the consent agenda is approved. Okay, first we'll start with the one that was taken off of the consent agenda, which was 1217 Fifth Avenue North.
Mr. Chairman, I recuse myself from this one as I had a potential financial interest in this, in submitting a proposal.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner.
Okay. This first case, the house at 1217 Fifth Avenue North, is a two-story brick Italianate style house, believed to have been constructed in the 1860s. The house has had rear additions over time, but the historic character of the historic house has been well preserved. The applicant is proposing to construct a new one-story rear addition off the rear left corner of an earlier sunroom addition. The new addition will have a 450 square foot footprint stepping out to the left side, the left edge of the earlier addition by 4 feet 6 inches, and the left is toward the bottom on this slide of the footprint of the house. The location does not negatively impact the appearance of the original structure because it is attached to an earlier sunroom addition that is extending more than 25 feet behind the rear wall of the original structure. The roof of the new addition will be a shed roof matching the pitch of that earlier addition, extending further out to the side at the rear so that it terminates 8 feet above grade, that the eave line terminates 8 feet above grade. Staff finds that this height and massing of the addition to be subordinate and compatible with the historic house and earlier additions, and to meet the guidelines for additions and new construction. Under current setback regulations, however, single-family dwelling on this lot is required to have a 3-foot side setback, although historic structures in Germantown typically were built with very little or no setback. The proposed addition would sit 1 foot from the left property boundary. Because this reduced setback is in keeping with the typical pattern of development in the historic neighborhood, staff finds it appropriate and that it does meet the guidelines. The exterior of the addition, the materials will be wood with wood siding and trim, fiberglass asphalt shingle, matching the materials of the existing addition. The small portion of the front-facing wall, there will be a wooden double-hung window. These materials are compatible with the historic house and also meet the design guidelines. In summary, staff is recommending approval of the proposed addition and setback reduction, finding it to be compatible with the historic context and to meet the Germantown Preservation Overlay design guidelines.
Thank you. Any questions for staff?
I would like to note, if you don't mind, that we did receive yesterday the email, a letter from the neighboring property owner stating her reasons that she would not like to see the setback reduction due to a tree and circulation of air and light.
Okay. I'd like to open public hearing if there's anyone that'd like to speak for or against this project. Please state your name and your address.
Push the speak button. Can you hear me? Now can you hear me?
Yes.
Well, I apologize, but I heard almost nothing that has been said to this point, so I beg your indulgence. My hearing aids are turned up as high as they'll go, and I didn't understand a word. So if I repeat something, I apologize.
Oh, that's fine.
I'm Burdell Campbell, and I am one of the residents of the property at 1217 Fifth Avenue North that's made the application for the variance. And we learned very last minute-ish, like yesterday, that our application for variance had been taken off the consent calendar. So preparations for this meeting were understandably very short. And I have here some materials that could not be brought out to you prepared ahead of time because we did not know that you would need them. It was taken off, it's probably been said, but it was taken off the consent calendar because Deanne Walker, who is next door, expressed opposition. And I believe you have a copy of her letter. Is that in the packet, Robin? And I will, in a certain way, I will be addressing those things as well as other things you might ask for. I need my glasses. Sorry. The occasion for this annex request is what happens when two 85-year-olds suddenly decide they need a place to sleep downstairs. As simple as that. Then you have your glasses and your hearing aids and you need a bedroom. I'm going back to Deanne Walker's letter and just sort of briefly go down it. She mentions the materials and the design of the building, and I think that has been covered. The Historic Commission has had the plans and has approved it, and they had recommended the project and had recommended the variance, so that we will need to discuss that. Then she mentions the the 100-year-old tree and the packet of materials you have, I think the last 2 pages are photographs we took yesterday of those trees. And if you go straight up from the fence that's in your lower left-hand corner, more than half of those big trees are over our property. So we're respective of the stately 100-year-old hackberry. Nobody knows how old that hackberry is, but it is it's the request for a variance of lot line will make no difference to the space that would be covered over the roots than if it were a 3-foot setback, which is standard. So that is an irrelevant. There can be no difference in those things.
Are you saying the trees are not on your?
The trees are rooted in Deanne's property. They come right up the property line, but the board fence that's on our side of the property line leaves the trees. They are her trees. But all those limbs that you see in those pictures are hanging over our property. In fact, somebody said, "Are you going to sleep out there with all those big hackberry hanging over you?" Oh, that's an item.
Can I ask a very simple question?
I'm sorry?
Is this your house here?
That's our property.
Yeah, okay.
That's a studio above our garage. So we're looking from our house.
Hitting the remote.
We're looking from our house back to, now that's the front of our house on the screen. And behind our house, actually on the alley, is our garage and a studio above it. Now, we're asking for a variance for only 18 feet, and you have that on your map that shows where the proposed addition would be. So there is a request for variance of lot line, which means a foot from the property line, along 18 feet of that proposed addition. If you continue back toward the alley for about 27 feet, you encounter this picture that I've given you. And that's where 30 feet for each one of them is a carriage house that has 3 apartments in it. That's on Deanne's property. And our garage, which was permitted when we built it almost 30 years ago. And then their carriage house was rehabbed after we built our garage. And if you'll notice on your second picture, the second picture is a view of that from the alley. And you can see the surveyed stake at the bottom. It goes right. And the wall of her carriage house is almost right on that property line. It's certainly not a foot away. But that's the way they were built in the 1860s and 70s. And that's what Germantown's standard was at the time. And so we have been told in the neighborhood, and it's been written, that with properties that were built on the allowed 0 lot line, then that gives us the basis for requesting that properties can now be built lot line. And Germantown is full of examples of that. I won't even try to give you all the addresses, but it happens all the time that it's allowed, and that's because we're building it the way things were built in the 60s and 70s when that neighborhood was originally built. You got the view from the alley is your second picture, and then the last picture shows that when the carriage house was rehabbed after our permitted garage was built, look at the overhang. The roof, the entire cornice, and all of those downspouts and gutters are way over the top of our garage. And we didn't like that when it happened. But as a matter of 2 neighbors working in a dense area, dense situation, that was done that way at least 25 years ago. So that's what you see at the back of the property, which makes the request for the 18 feet of setback, 27 feet forward, it's almost a minor request. Now, going along down,
And if you would just
I'm sorry?
If you would just wait maybe 2 more minutes, just in respect
Oh,
to
now, I
time.
wasn't given a time limit, but I'll get through.
Okay.
If you look, now, I think you have pictures that Deanne Walker sent, but yours are not in color, but maybe you can tell on the black and white, where there's a board fence and a house beyond it. The house beyond is our house, and if you started at that first post and went back 18 feet, that's the only setback we're asking for, is that short distance. Now, let's see if there's anything else. She discusses that perhaps we should build our annex on a lot that's to the north of our house. That's a separate deeded property. It is our garden, and it's from street to alley, and it belongs. It's a deeded property in my husband's name. And in order to build over there, you've got to combine those deeds, and that's a whole another. You know about that. Now, let's see if there's anything else now. Then she discusses the business of the fence and what's going to happen to the fence, and I think that's not what we're supposed to be discussing here, so I'm going to skip over that. Deanne was once a longtime resident, an original resident. More recently, she is an absentee owner, and for, I'm guessing, close to a decade, it's just under a decade, she's lived out of Nashville, and as an absentee landlord, she's not looking across that fence nor toward our property, and the house was empty for some close to 3 years. Almost 5 years ago, we chatted with her about the long-time empty house next door, and we actually rented it for Christmas of '08. Clan Campbell came, and our grandchildren and so forth with their sleeping bags, and I rented it from Deanne, and it made a very nice Christmas camp house. But it was an empty house for many years, and it is occupied now by someone that's leasing it. And if you have any questions beyond what I have said or the materials I can provide for you.
Any questions to the owner?
I'm not sure are trees part of our purview? No. Okay, they're not. I'm just curious. I still don't understand where this tree is. Is it in the back?
Yeah.
Towards
Or
the
you have
dirt?
your map. You have your little map that I held up. Where's my copy?
It's by the garage. Is that where it is? Okay.
Yes.
I don't know if you can see the screen above you. Doesn't show that tree very well, but it is at it's
very rear?
towards the rear. It's forward of her carriage house. Oh, now one thing she mentions is that if we were allowed to build this annex, it would sort of like be a solid building from street to alley. That's what inner center density is all about. And there are repeated sections. There's the Germantown courtyard, there's the Germantown station, and more of that is happening. But if you move to her, she's mentioned this as one of her concerns. If you move to her backyard, behind her house is a gazebo-like structure, and it's in one of your pictures. And if you measured from that gazebo back to her carriage house, it's about the same amount of space that would be left in our yard if we put in this annex. So both properties will have extended buildings, and again, that's what we're facing and coping with in inner city Germantown.
Okay.
Any other questions?
All right. Any other questions for the? Okay. Thank you very much.
All right, now there's two other people, John Horton, who is a neighbor and our legal person today, has and lives in the block.
Okay.
And has actually lived in the carriage house.
All right. Well, if you'll also just say your name and address.
Good Good afternoon. John Horton, 1231 Fifth Avenue North. As Ms. Campbell alluded, I'm legal counsel for the applicants. She's correct. I used to live in the carriage house at 1217 Fifth Avenue North, and I live at the end of the block now, so I'm very familiar with the surroundings. The first thing I wanted to deal with was hardship as to why the rear addition has to be addressed the way it is. What we're dealing with here, as opposed to a hardship relating to the property itself, is a hardship relating to the existing structure. We have an 1860s house, 2-story on the front, 1-story in the middle, 2-story on the back. The 2-story rear section was probably built first. That's the way things were in Germantown back in the 1860s and 70s. But it has 2 rear doors. Now, the addition is designed to allow one of the rear doors to serve as access into the master bedroom suite. There's already a bathroom right there next to that door. The other rear door is in the middle of the brick 2-story. The plan as devised avoids any problems related to having to cover up that second historic door. It actually incorporates it into the rear as a rear exit for the house. Okay, so what we're dealing with here is trying to squeeze an addition into an area that won't disrupt original historic fabric, and also provide a sufficient size master bedroom so that you're not looking at just this real narrow galley going down through the back of the property. The tree is a slab construction. Whatever is going to happen to the root system is going to be minimized by slab versus a crawl space construction. We're not talking about excavating, huge footings or anything like that. And whatever impact it has on this particular tree is 3 foot versus 1 foot is not going to make a difference. But as you pointed out, you don't really address trees. The trees are located at the very back of the property next to the 2 structures at the rear of the property. You've seen Ms. Campbell's photographs of how close these 2 alley buildings are. That's what Germantown's was and is becoming. I've lived there since 1993, and I've seen it. We're packing them in like sardines. You put as many people on as possible. This addition does not violate the ISR. It's appropriate for this individual lot and is the best solution when you take into consideration the context of trying your best to add, a master suite to a rear to an existing structure without destroying historic fabric. The Campbells have lived in Germantown for 30-plus years. They've done an excellent job with the renovation and restoration of the structure. I think their goals are commendable in trying to minimize impact and to leave the existing structure as it is. Airflow was one other objection. We don't have airflow in Germantown. We've got a 6-story 277 unit apartment building a block from me. People are being packed in. That's just something you can't expect. Everybody gets upset with views. Vacant lot comes on the market, somebody builds something higher than their structure, so they've lost their view of the Capitol. Well, sorry, that's just Germantown. We're, getting it in, and we're putting as many people on there as possible under the UZO. The separate lot issue, well, I have the same issue with my house. I have a garden lot like the Campbells, and I have my house on an individual lot. They're deeded separately. It doesn't make economic sense to combine lots like that in Germantown. Yes, the Campbells could combine their lots. They could build on the other side of the house as opposed to this side, but then they would lose a lot of value. Vacant lots in Germantown have value, even if they're a garden. When you combine a lot with your existing house, it doesn't increase your comp. The square footage of your land does not really come into play. So it really doesn't make any sense to combine those 2 lots and to remodel and build an addition onto the side of the house. And besides, that would be clearly against the design guidelines. You want additions on the rear of the property as opposed to something new on the side of the property. For those reasons, I'd request that you grant this variance as it is consistent. The staff has recommended approval, and the objections by the abutting property owner really don't amount to much in the grand scheme of things and the way Germantown is being developed these days. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else that would like to speak for or against this proposal? Once again, please
My
state your
name is
name.
Richard Edler. I own R.D. Edler Construction and Development Corporation. I'm a Tennessee licensed building contractor for residential. One thing that I just wanted to point out, and in our drawing, that we're looking to not build zero lot line, but a foot away, primarily because of the overhang factor on the garage that exists below, that is on Ms. Walker's property. Essentially, that is illegal. And, you know, in designing our structure, we want to hold back from that so we would not impose on that part of the law. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you very much. Anyone else? Please come forward and state your name and address.
My name is Ernest Campbell. I live at 1217 Fifth Avenue North. And I thought it might be usefully clarifying to you, if you have any further questions in your mind, if I called your attention to a photograph that was submitted to you by Deanne Walker. And it is this one that I would like to talk about, use for a moment, if this is at all clear to you. It's one. It's on what I have. It is the back of the 3 photographs that she submitted. 2 points. One, in addition to the fact that there is on the very same property line already a precedence for a zero lot line construction. The zero, or not zero, but within 1 foot request that we're making, or slightly more than 1 foot request we're making. The space, if you look at that fence and note I think maybe you can see 5 posts in that fence. The almost exact distance that we are asking to build 1 foot or 15 feet away from that line is 2 of those posts, the distance of 2 of those posts. The other point I wanted to make, it pertains to the tree that Deanne mentioned. You see that tree as you look toward the right edge of the brick carriage house at the rear. That tree, it does not sit on the property line. It grew on Deanne's property and is Deanne's tree.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate it. Does anyone else like to speak? Okay. I would like to close the public hearing. Any discussion?
I move approval
Do I hear a second?
based on staff recommendation.
Second.
All in favor? All opposed? Okay. Motion carries. Thank you very much. Okay, we're moving on to new business now as well. 4410 Elkins Avenue has been removed from new business at the owner's request. So the first one now is 1408 Woodland.
Thank you. Was this yours? Yes. Sorry for the delay. This proposal is for a new single-family dwelling on a presently vacant lot. There's an existing curb cut with a driveway that currently terminates just beyond the front corner of the proposed house. And at this time, the applicant doesn't know if they plan to keep that driveway or not. So assuming that it will be kept, one of staff's recommendations is to move the building slightly to the right, just enough to allow for the driveway to continue past the midpoint of the house, eliminating front yard parking. Staff further recommends that the driveway be concrete strips, at least up to the front wall of the house. There are no known walkways, lighting, fences, walls, or accessory structures as part of this plan at this time. The proposed infill design, and this is the left side, meets the guidelines for scale, setback, rhythm of spacing, and rhythm of openings. It also meets the guidelines for orientation, although staff does recommend that the mechanicals be located on the side beyond the midpoint of the house or in the rear. It also meets the guidelines for height with the exception of the porch rack, and staff recommends a minimum of a 1-foot porch rack. All of the known materials meet the design guidelines and have been approved by the Commission in the past, with the exception of multiple lap siding reveals and changes in materials vertically rather than horizontally. Historically, material changes happened horizontally rather than vertically, usually at the floor lines or foundation line. The design guidelines also encourage belt courses or a change in materials from one story to another to break up the massing, and so staff recommends a belt course be added between the first and second floors. The cladding have a consistent reveal of 5 inches, and that staff provide final review of railing, window materials, and roof color and materials. The design guidelines require that the roof shape and orientation be visually compatible with the neighborhood. Generally, primary historic roof pitches are between 612 and 1212, with lower slopes for roof of dormers, porches, and bays. The proposed roof pitches for this project are 512 and 712 for an asymmetrical roof line, and the porch roof is 512. The rear bedroom will appear to have a flat roof. The rear bedroom and porch roofs are appropriate for the neighborhood. However, the front and side gables do not meet the minimum 612 that has usually been required. Historically, front gables are symmetrical, and although the design guidelines allow for contemporary versions of historic homes, they also require that the overall form, including the roof shape, be similar to what is seen historically. Staff recommends that the projecting gables be symmetrical with a 1212 pitch to be more consistent with historic context. The guidelines require that the window openings on the primary street-related or front facade be similar to historic patterns seen within the district. Typically, front facades of historic homes had a large amount of window area relative to the amount of wall space, and frequently front windows are seen as pairs of double-hung windows that are essentially twice as tall as they are wide. It's atypical for small awning or hopper windows to be on a primary facade. Therefore, staff recommends an alteration to the primary window configuration so that all the windows in the front are approximately twice as tall as they are wide. Those awning windows on the side elevation staff felt were appropriate, as smaller windows were typical on side elevations. The gable vent on the main facade is also out of scale for the building, and staff recommends either removing the vent or diminishing it by 50%. With these recommended alterations to the window pattern and gable vent of the main facade, the project meets section 2B7. And then these are some of the buildings that you see right in the immediate context. The right one's looking down towards the corner, and the others are right around it and across the street. In summary, staff recommends approval with the conditions that a belt course be added between the first and second floors, cladding have a consistent reveal of 5 inches, the gable vent be removed or diminished by 50%, all windows on the primary facade be twice as tall as they are wide, the projecting gables be symmetrical with a 1212 pitch, the porch rack be a minimum of 1 foot, mechanicals be located on the side, beyond the midpoint of the house, or at the rear. Staff provide final review of railings, windows, roof color, and materials, and the building be moved to the right just enough to allow for the driveway to continue past the midpoint of the house, eliminating the need for the front yard parking or removing the existing driveway. And with these conditions, staff finds that the project meets 2B for new construction in the Laughlin Springs East End Neighborhood Conservation Zoning Overlay.
Thank you very much. Is the applicant here? Please state your name and address. I'm sorry, were there any other questions for Robin before she sat down? Apologize for that. Okay.
I'm convinced you guys are going to be able to see that from here. My name is Drew Sloss. I live at 708 Porter Road in East Nashville, 37206. I'm involved in, I'm actually the general contractor licensed in the state of Tennessee. We only have issues with 4 out of the 9 recommendations that the staff provided us. However, we feel that these 4 items change our design into a replica of a historic looking house rather than a modern interpretation of a historic home. The guidelines' general principles specifically state that new construction shouldn't imitate past styles, creating pseudo-old buildings, which in our opinion would happen were these 4 changes made. The design we have presented is a modern interpretation of Victorian. As the new construction guidelines state, new buildings inspired by historic styles are appropriate. Can you see these down here? These homes here are found within several blocks, in some cases 2.5 blocks of our building site, and have been approved by the Metro Historic Council in the past. In Lockland Springs, there's 303 South 14th Street, 1108 Russell Street, 1303 Forest Avenue, 1811 Forest Avenue, and in the Edge Hill Preservation District, 817 Bosquewell is a new construction, and 900 Bosquewell is an addition example. These all qualify as modern interpretations of various historic styles and have been deemed appropriate with respect to the guidelines in the past. I'd like to step through each of the 4 things that we would object to. First is a belt course be added to the first and second floors. The Lockland Springs East End Neighborhood Conservation Zoning Overlay District is comprised of early Victorians, transitional Victorians, and craftsmen. We searched and found 14 true 2-story historic homes without a belt course. We even found true 2-story historic homes without a belt course in Edgefield Preservation Zoning Overlay, 921 Fatherland Street. In addition, we found 9+ new infill 2-story homes without a belt course approved by Metro Historic. You can see the addresses provided on the packets, as well as a sample of the pictures. These are the reasons we do not agree with this recommendation. Second, the cladding having a consistent reveal of 5 inches. Again, this district is comprised of early Victorians, transitional, and craftsmen. We searched and found 19 historic homes with exposed lap siding ranging in the 3 to 8.5 inch wide range. And this was just a small sampling of homes in this district. In addition, we found 4 new infill homes with a 6-inch exposed lap siding approved by Metro Historic Commission. Incidentally, the Lockland Springs guidelines on Metro's website indicates a minimum of a 5-inch reveal, not a maximum. That may or may not be a typo. Regarding the change in reveal on our facades from 6-inch to 3-inch, in several of the detail areas of our home, we disagree with the change in material request. The guidelines did not show a preference as to material choice and why it is appropriate to have a stucco panel next to a hardy plank or a hardy plank abutting to brick. Nor do they should they have a preference to a hardy board adjacent to a smaller revealed hardy board. You can note several material changes that happen at the story level on some of these homes. 1303 Forest, we have brick abutting to hardy board. 303 South 14, that changes from kind of a hardy panel to that rain detail, and then here as well. Let's see where I am. Furthermore, the guidelines actually say when different materials are used, we're not changing materials. We're just presenting the same material in a different interpretation. And I've provided addresses for those in the packet. These are the reasons we do not agree with this recommendation. Recommendation number 4, all windows on the primary facade be twice as tall as they are wide. Transom, oval, and diamond-shaped windows all have historical relevance and can be found in the district in Queen Anne's and transitional Victorians. Oval and diamond-shaped windows were used as stylistic choices and complement the larger windows surrounding. Our horizontal, or if you want to call it a transom window, is a historical interpretation of the same principles and fits, in our opinion, within the fabric of this neighborhood and is meant to complement the double-hung windows on the front facade. Additionally, we found 3 new infill homes with transom windows on the primary facade at 303 South 14th, 1303 Forest, and 900 Bosquewell here. Interestingly enough, on the 303 South 14th, if you look at the right-facing window, the staff...
Microphone, please.
Okay, right here.
That window didn't exist. The staff actually recommended that that window be added, which is the same shape as the windows that we're discussing right now. These are the reasons we disagree with this recommendation. Additionally, we're providing more windows on the house than I think most people are doing. Finally, number 5, the projecting gables be symmetrical with the 12-12 pitch. There are 4 modern homes infill with asymmetrical or different low-pitch roofs approved by MHC, shown here. 303 South 14th has a 312 and 412 pitch roof with a front-facing shed dormer. 1303 Forest Avenue has a low-pitch roof. It wasn't actually in the application that was approved. 1108 Russell Street has 312, 412, and 512, and 817 Boscobel, a 612 and a parapet roof. These are the reasons that we disagree with this recommendation. Finally, the design we have is presented as a modern interpretation of the Victorian, using new construction design guidelines just like these homes presented. The guidelines state that new buildings should continue to demonstrate the changes in taste and technology while being compatible with surroundings. It's our feeling that we are honoring both the past and the present with our design, and hope you guys find the same way.
Let me get one clarification then. So you are 1, 2, 4, and 5, is that right? Those are the 4 conditions that you
Yes, 1, 2, 4, and 5 are the ones.
Just wanted to verify that.
Yes.
Any questions to the applicant from Commissioner?
I do. In several of these examples, I guess particularly, forgive me if I get the addresses wrong, 303, the change of materials that you referenced that this commission has approved, or the staff has reviewed, and this commission has approved in the past, there's a change in form that corresponds to a change in materials. And in looking at this, there's kind of an application, or I'm noting a difference that there's an application of a corner board or a vertical board treatment in what otherwise is a flat facade. And I'm curious, I feel like I understand the intent at the front porch in changing the exposure of the siding. However, in plan, in elevation, it's concealed as a detail where 3-inch meets the other exposure. There's not an engaged pilaster. Do those just kind of crash into each other? Or is there just a seamless vertical line? How does that work?
On the, you're talking about on the front right massing?
Both the front right massing and then under the front porch roof.
They have the 6-inch butts into a flat 1x4 and then transitions from there into a 3-inch. Is that the question you're asking? Essentially, it's a boxed-in detail.
Yeah, a little more information about the detail. I would presume that behind the porch column there might be either an engaged pilaster, or you've clarified that there would be a
then it would terminate into another 1x4. Is that what or something similar?
I guess I'm asking you. I don't want to make assumptions for you.
Yeah, I mean, yes, the 6-inch reveal will not terminate directly into the 3-inch reveal. And then on the 303 on the left side, that doesn't actually change in, I don't know if I'm wrong.
Bottom right.
The change in material doesn't involve a protrusion on the left facing side. I think that you made that.
On the side elevation, I'm maybe referring more to the front elevation. Right. And corresponding to the front elevation of your project, which we tend to make a distinction between the front and side, as we in the past have given more weight to much more weight to front elevations as to those that are either somewhat seen in passing and maybe further back on the house, but point taken. Okay.
On the side protrusion on our side where the kitchen, there's a overhang. It does the same. It's used that way, but just not on the front.
There's there's corner boards indicated at the corner of the house, and maybe this is just a drawing representation. There doesn't appear, where the front piece, you've got the 2 gables crossing and the front piece comes out towards the street. and gives room for the front porch. There's not a corner board indicated, or it doesn't appear there's a corner board indicated on that portion of the house. Is that a drawing error, or is that siding going to wrap around without a corner board?
There will be no siding wrapping around without corner boards.
Okay.
I don't desire to have any mitered siding.
Gotcha.
Any further questions for the applicant?
Does the 3-inch exposure, just, or maybe, sorry, let me look at another elevation here, and I may be able to answer that question. Maybe not. So on the front porch, not the street side, but the side elevation, does that 3-inch right next to the front door, does it kind of turn the building there, or is it only in the street-facing facade?
The 3-inch on the front is only under, it's defined, it terminates where the front porch terminates.
So there's a little 3-foot section, and then it terminates at the corner board, so everything under the porch is the 3-inch exposure?
Correct.
Okay.
There's 3-inch on the return, part of the return. See
Right.
that?
Yep. I'm looking for
The
the,
left side.
that's what I assumed, I just wanted to clarify.
You good? Yeah. Any other further questions to the applicant? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak for or against? Thank you. Please state your name and address.
My name's Matt Pogue. I live at 103 South 13th in East Nashville as well, 37206. My understanding of the design guidelines for new construction also applies to additions. So I was going to point out a couple of, is that me? Making a couple of additions in the neighborhood. One is on 1403 Forest. That has a modern roof pitch, asymmetrical low roof pitches, all approved by MHC. Also, the 220 Chapel house has a parapet roof. All of these are visible from the street, so would be under the same design guidelines as new constructions. So just wanted to point those out, as a way that we're using the design guidelines, for our interpretation of this new construction.
Okay, thank you very much. Any further comments from anyone in the audience? Okay, close public hearing. Discussion.
Robin, can you respond to their comments, please?
He mentioned that belt courses are not on all historic buildings and all in new infill, and that's absolutely true. Belt courses have just been a suggestion when they help to break up a large massing. And there are large massings on the side of this house, and we thought it might be useful. The cladding issue, it's not an issue of it being 3 inches versus 5 inches, but where that change happens. Historically, changes in materials happen horizontally, at foundation lines, at floor lines, and not vertically. I would caution you against comparing this to additions, because they do follow different design guidelines. Some of the projects noted, although they may be, half of a gable that have been approved in the past, still from the street read as symmetrical. Does that help at all?
Yes. Belt course cladding. I think that's it. Windows?
Is it a,
Windows, too, I'm sorry.
is this, I haven't been here as long, but is this a subjective issue? Issues
Well, no,
at
is
this
you can-
point? I mean, is he interpreting is he have a separate interpretation of the code and going through comparative studies and applying the way he wants to versus how you're interpreting the guidelines?
Right, we're trying to interpret the guidelines as the commission has for the last few years.
Then how do you respond to the examples that he showed us?
Again, that it's not that it's a 3-inch reveal or a 5-inch reveal, it's where it happens. Certainly, there are historic homes and new construction with different reveals. The windows usually are on historic buildings twice as tall as they are wide. Yes, there are different shapes of windows, but those usually take place on side elevations or on top of another window or on top of a doorway. Historically, most of the windows are twice as tall as they are wide. Again, most of them are symmetrical. Most of them have that 6 to 12 pitch. Again, we were just going by the context and the design guidelines.
Any other questions to staff? Okay. Any discussion?
I think there may be some drawing, just some linear drawing elevation pieces that I have questions about, which is in principle, a modern interpretation of the guidelines certainly is not something I would have issue with. But I do wonder about the windows on the front are pretty prominent. This is the frontmost facade of the house, or a very prominent feature of this modern interpretation. And I'll say that in our review and driving around the things we've approved, oftentimes you'll see that window used in a bathroom, in a stairwell where there's some change, there's reason behind doing it. And a lot of them are less than pleasant in terms of looking at the guidelines and dealing with issues of proportion and issues of just appearance from the street, that shape of window is odd and I think is off-putting on the most primary facade. And I have some questions about that modern interpretation of the guidelines personally. I think the applicant had said that there won't be any place where their siding is mitered, and so I think that clarifies for me some of the, on the elevation where it appears like there is no corner board illustrated in the documents, so that would, I think, clear some of that information up. If there is I think rarely in historic, and even in a lot of things we've approved, I don't know that we like to make a habit of having flat facades where you just change materials without some in or out push and pull. In this case, because it's like material and there's really a change in pattern, it's not completely objectionable, but I think it needs to be, specifically at the porch, instead of just a 1x4, an engaged pilaster that gives some meat to that material change there would make a little more sense to me. That would be on the primary facade of the house as opposed to an elevation. You can see the columns out in front, and you can't really see where that transition. It's not really drawn where that transition happens. That'd be a recommendation I'd have if we're for that change in material underneath the porch roof.
One point I'd bring up for discussion is the belt course. It doesn't seem as if there's a big volume for this house. I'm just curious if anybody else would want to pick up that and run that discussed even more. It doesn't.
It doesn't bother me.
Yeah.
I don't know if I can reach that far, especially on the side with all the windows.
Yeah, that's
You know, I
kinda
mean,
what I
that the windows themselves sort of break up all that.
Right. That's kind of what I was feeling for this. I do have seen, we've had some where such a volume, it made sense, but.
I guess that's sort of my first question is, are we just all taking this subjectively and I like this or don't like this? And is that what we're down to when you have modern interpretations of guidelines? Is that, I mean, not, or is...
Well, hopefully we, it's, I mean, of course, some of it is, but it really is how we can apply the guidelines as we, based on precedent, based on what we see going forward. We use that historical kind of as part of our own guidelines, so how we make our decisions. Someone else can say that more eloquently, but.
I mean, if just in particular under item 7, yeah, it is our responsibility to look at proportion and rhythm of openings, the relationship of width to height of windows and doors, and the rhythm of solids to voids in new buildings shall be visually compatible with the surrounding buildings. So absolutely, there is some subjective judgment that we have to apply to this, and mine is based on things we've approved in the past that are more fitting than others, and particularly with this shape of window, it tends to appear and indicate in elevation something that, this space really wasn't big enough for a window, so I kind of put some light in here and because it needed it, but I wanted to put a couch on the wall. I mean, we've had those kinds of arguments before. Not that that's this applicant's argument, but that they tend to be less than pleasing in terms of the final result.
Oh, I kind of agree with that. I don't object to any of it as it's designed, except for the 2 horizontal windows on the front. They bother me a little bit more than I would like. And looking at the floor plan, I can't see any reason for the high window, except maybe in the second floor. I believe it's in a bathroom over a counter or something like that. But in the living room or the front room, I don't see any useful reason for it to be up high.
And as we don't review floor plans, I think mine's particularly, and ours is particularly an argument to the most prominent facade on the building.
Yeah.
Well, are we close to a motion then?
I think we are. There was. You've verified with the applicant that, and helped me out here, they were taking specific issue with items 1, 2, 4?
Yep, and 5. 1, 2, 4, and 5.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure 3, that if there was some discussion that we needed to have about 3, but if the applicant's willing to look at that and...
Yeah, I think if we just focus on those personally.
Sure. No, I'm fine. I wanted to make sure that we
if we need, I mean, of course, if anybody wants to, they're more than, obviously at this point, you're more than welcome to, but those were the ones I thought we kind of how we were focusing our discussion.
I'll make a motion to approve with following conditions. Or motion to approve with staff recommendations, accepting item 1, that a belt course not be required between first and second floors. The cladding item, I don't. I would recommend that item 2 be accepted, but I would add an additional condition that at the porch an engaged pilaster be on the primary facade of that to distinguish between the difference in exposure as opposed to a 1x4 board, that there be an engaged partial column at that location to distinguish between the change in siding, very much like is indicated where the 1x4 is more appropriate on the other facades because columns are not present. And also that all of the corner boards be installed as they're not, I think it's a drawing area, as they're not all represented at all corners on the elevations. And that an alternate window design for the rectangular windows on the primary facade be submitted and can be approved at the staff level. A proportion that is more closely matching or a proportion that meets the design guidelines would be recommended in that regard, and that item number 5 be accepted as well.
Okay.
Second.
I think I seconded it.
Okay. Are we pretty clear? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, motion carries.
I've got another question.
Oh,
I just wanted to ask a question. So,
If you could come to the microphone.
thank you.
If you want.
My concern, so we agree that the asymmetrical roof line is okay, per what you guys just said. Can we just remove the transom windows altogether? And because if you center the double hung windows on an asymmetrical roof, I feel like it's gonna look more modern than what we have right now.
really quick, legally, do I need to withdraw the motion or whatever since we've already voted on it, or can we just say to work it out with staff? How should I do this working?
I think that you could give us some direction as to, because the motion was that it just needs to meet the guidelines.
Okay.
So if you have further direction you'd like to provide to staff and the applicant, I think that would be very appropriate.
I don't think we moved, the motion didn't necessarily mean that they'd just do away with those two windows.
No, that wasn't the motion.
Disproportion,
I mean,
okay.
you'd have to redesign.
Well, and I think that's what he's asking is, could he get away with just removing them and then leaving those corner windows where they are?
Yeah, and I think we can give some guidance while an applicant is in front of us, so he doesn't have to come back if that's his choice, that we could provide some further clarification. Yeah. As I made the motion, I think removal of those windows would, again, on the primary facade would and I certainly wasn't suggesting to shift the corner windows over, as that's, I think, integral to your concept here in this modern interpretation. I think that a window of different shape would be more appropriate.
Yeah.
And I get you've got some floor plan issues going on there. Rather than sit here and design it for you and make those kind of design decisions for you, I would encourage you to, maybe with a combination of looking at the first floor in combination with the second floor facade. I don't know that those two windows necessarily need to be the same, but that there be an implication of a window that's maybe more appropriate to size and proportion with the height as is stated in the guidelines. Okay. Is that helpful?
I think so.
And I would.
One of when you strip this home down, you take the siding off, and you take a Victorian of similar shape, and you take the siding off, and you look at them. We're going to have an asymmetrical roof. That's going to tell you it's modern architecture. But the only other thing that will tell you modern architecture is the fenestration. If we adjust the openings in the front facade, then the only thing telling you that it's modern is the asymmetrical roof. And so that's my concern. I'm not trying to build a cube and put it on Woodland Street, but I am trying to do something that's a little unique. You drive past it, and then when you look behind you, go, oh, I think that's interesting, as opposed to that's got 4 double hung windows on the front facade like every other Victorian.
And I don't feel like our motion has delimited you to any particular type or style of window.
Sure.
I think it's more of a width to height issue in my reading of the guidelines and the motion that I've presented. I think there's a solution here that still says modern. I don't think your project is so thin on the modern front that those windows would cause it to not be modern any longer.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Okay, 2801 Blair Boulevard.
All right. 2801 Blair Boulevard is a 1.5-story stone craftsman-style house constructed circa 1930. It is listed in the Hillsborough West End National Register District as a contributing structure. The lot is at the corner of Blair Boulevard and Westmoreland Drive, and the lot is nearly twice the size of your average lot in the vicinity. The applicant is proposing to demolish an existing non-contributing garage. It was constructed in the 1980s, and to construct a new garage. The demolition of the existing garage meets the design guidelines because the structure is non-contributing. The new garage will be located in the southeast corner of the property, accessing the existing curb cut and driveway onto Westmoreland Drive. The proposed garage would be located behind the primary structure in roughly the location of the existing garage, with a 10-foot setback off of Westmoreland Drive and a 5-foot setback from the rear property line of this structure, which is the property line it shares with the adjacent property at 2802 Westmoreland. This proposed location doesn't meet the current required setbacks. The rear setback, it does meet the street setback, but the rear setback is currently 20 feet. So they're requesting a reduction to 5 feet. However, in the context of with the unique lot configuration, the proposed setback is not disruptive to the street patterns of the area, and staff finds the setbacks and location to meet the design guidelines, as well as a setback reduction. The footprint of the garage will be L-shaped with 2 bays facing toward the one driveway. The total footprint of the structure will cover 1,660 square feet, which is 3/4 of the size of the footprint of the primary structure. And this is larger than the typical garage in the area, but because of the large lot size and other lot peculiarities, the total area of the house and garage will be just combined 21% of the lot, whereas bulk zoning would allow 45%. The new garage will have a roof peak 21 feet 3 inches above the finished floor level and an eave height of 9 feet. And due to the significant drop in grade behind the house, the floor level of the garage will be approximately 7 feet lower than that of the house. And the roof ridge will be 9 feet lower than the ridge of the house in actual elevation. The height of the garage is subordinate to the house and meets the design guidelines. The grade of the proposed garage location helps to hide it a great deal from the massing, helps to hide a great deal of the massing of the structure as seen at least from this view along Blair Boulevard. Again, larger than typical historic garages, the conditions of this lot, particularly the size and grade change, allow for the structure to be subordinate, whereas this same design might not be on a more typical flat lot. For these reasons, staff finds a scale to meet design guidelines for height and massing. The materials to be used on the structure will reflect those of the character of the house, including stucco textured cement fiber panel siding with decorative half timbering, fiberglass asphalt shingle, roof, split face block foundation. The structure will have wood windows, wood composite windows, and carriage house style doors. These materials are compatible with the house and surrounding historic structures and meet the material design guidelines. Staff would like to review the window selection prior to purchase and installation to verify that they are appropriate. And in summary, staff recommends approval of the application to demolish the existing garage and construct a new garage with reduced setbacks, with the condition that staff review windows prior to purchase and installation in order to verify that they are appropriate. Otherwise, staff finds the application to meet the Hillsborough West End Conservation Zoning Overlay Design Guidelines.
Okay, thank you very much. Any questions for staff? Okay, thanks.
I do actually have one quick one. And seeing Preston here, I'm sure there's been some dialogue back and forth and some work that's been done on this. Is there any concern for staff in looking at the site plan and seeing where this fronts Westmoreland and it sits well forward of the adjacent? Again, the orientation is different. This house fronts Blair, the more primary street, one could argue, in the neighborhood, and I get all that, but what is staff's, is there some concern there? Has there been some previous discussion so that the commissioners can understand from whence we've come here?
Given that the property is a corner lot and doesn't have an alley, so it actually fronts two streets with two properties on the adjacent property lines without an alley or easement in between. If this structure were 50% of the footprint of the house, this location would meet current setbacks and it would be appropriate, and therefore, even though the structure is 3/4 of the footprint of the house as opposed to half, the location is still appropriate. They're just requesting a setback reduction. The 10-foot setback from Westmoreland meets setbacks as is.
Thank you. The applicant like to say anything? Give your name.
I'm Preston Quirk, architect, and this is actually my house. I live at 2801 Blair Boulevard, Nashville, Tennessee, 37212. I'll keep this short and sweet like I often do when I have a staff recommendation for approval, but I'll just say we've been in this house 25 years. We have several cars and a boat and things we would like to have inside, and that's the reason for this project. And if this is approved, we may be in the house another 25 years. So that's really all I have to say.
Okay, thank you.
I'll address any questions if there are any more. Thank you.
I just had one precedent. I know it's probably a safety and security concern, as windows in any garage are. I'm in the experience of walking down the sidewalk, and is there a sidewalk on Westmoreland?
Yes, there is.
We're 10 feet, I guess, off the sidewalk. Is that the street edge?
They're actually, if you look at this drawing, kind of the bottom right corner, the odd-shaped thing is the boat in the garage, but the wall to the right of that, there's actually a pretty thick hedge of viburnum there, and it will remain. I haven't had a survey done recently, but I think the sidewalk is on the property line, so there will be 10 feet between the sidewalk and the garage.
In there, okay. I just as pedestrian experience, walking along there and at the other house is set back, window pattern along there was just something, a question I had.
Well, you probably won't see that window, honestly, and we really want to keep that hedge. If I've got to move it more than 10 feet to keep the hedge, I will. We've been putting off getting a survey until we went through this process.
Understand. So. Okay, great, thanks.
Thanks.
Okay, anybody from the audience like to speak about this project? Okay, close public hearing. Discussion amongst commissioners.
Move approval based on staff recommendation.
Have a second? Discussion?
Have a little discussion, because as we often see these things come back to us, well, you did this on this lot. I would, I guess, like to affirm staff's, in seconding this motion, affirm staff's and the commission's analysis that this is a unique lot, a corner condition, and that all of the previously pointed out items are germane to this, the size of this garage and its location on the lot. And with that, I'll second the motion.
Okay, thank you. Have a motion and a second. All in favor? All opposed? Okay, motion carries. Next on the agenda is 209 16th Street.
209 North 16th Street is an application for the demolition of a non-contributing structure and the construction of new infill. The house currently on the site was built after 1951 and lacks architectural and historic integrity, and therefore staff finds its demolition to meet the design guidelines. The site is situated on North 16th Street between Forest and Gartland Avenues in Lockland Springs. The infill will face North 16th Street, which is how most of the historic buildings, or all the historic buildings on the east side of North 16th Street, they're all oriented towards North 16th Street. Staff finds that the infill meets the historic context in terms of its orientation, width, depth, scale, and lot coverage. So here's an image of the front facade. The new infill will be 2 stories in height and a total of 28 feet, 10 inches tall. Staff finds the infill's height to meet the context of the historic neighborhood, where the heights range from 18 feet to 31 feet. The structure will have a cross-gabled roof with a slope of 10-12, which is appropriate for the neighborhood. The structure will be primarily clad in cement fiberboard with wood brackets and trim. The foundation will be split-face concrete block, and the roof will be asphalt shingle. The windows will be clad wood, and the front door will also be wood. The drawings submitted indicate hardy stucco panels for the chimney. Staff finds these panels to be problematic for use on a chimney because they look more like wood than stucco, and they typically require battens and corner boards. Staff recommends that the chimney be clad in stone, brick, stucco, or another masonry material, and the applicant has agreed to this condition. With the use of a masonry material on the chimney, staff finds that the proposed materials are appropriate, and with the condition that staff review and approve the final specifications and colors and all the stuff for the materials. This is the rear elevation. As you can see, the project does involve an attached garage in the rear. Staff finds the attached garage to be appropriate for several reasons. One is because of the slope of the site, it's able to be located at the basement level of the house. The other is because it's in the rear of the property at the back of the house where garages and detached accessory structures are typically located. And for the third reason is that it does not face the street, and you would not see the garage doors at all from the street. Here are the 2 side elevations. The staff finds that the infill's proportion and rhythm of openings meet the design guidelines. I wanted to point out that the project does involve a wall dormer, since we had discussion last month about wall dormers. Although staff typically finds wall dormers to be inappropriate, we have determined in this instance that this wall dormer meets the design guidelines because it is located towards the back of the house, and because it is located on a building plane that is set 11 feet in from the frontward-facing wall of the house. So it's 11 feet back, really, from the kind of gabled portion with the chimney. At most, the wall dormer will be minimally visible. Here are some context photos. These are the photos that are to the south of the site on North 16th Street. The one property that's to the north of the site is a non-contributing structure. And then here are additional houses in the neighborhood. These houses are pretty much across the street from the site, but all of the houses on the western side of North 16th Street face their respective side streets, so they don't face North 16th Street. I'm happy to answer any questions, and I believe the applicant is here, but in summary, we recommend approval with the conditions that staff review the final material colors and choices, the chimney be clad in stucco, brick, stone, or another masonry material, any utilities be located in the rear of the house or in a side facade beyond the midpoint of the house, and staff review and approve any new landscape features and lighting and other issues. So.
Any questions to staff? You said the applicant was not here?
He is here.
He is here, okay. Would the applicant like to say anything? Please come forward. No? So you are okay with the staff recommendations for the 4? Okay. Close public hearing. Any discussion? Motion?
Move approval.
Second?
Staff recommendations.
By staff. Second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, thank you very much. 4302 Elkins.
Sure. 4302 Elkins Avenue is an application to demolish a primary and an accessory structure and construct new infill in the Park and Elkins Neighborhood Conservation Zoning Overlay. Although the existing building dates to the mid-1930s, staff finds that the house has undergone multiple alterations over the years and has lost its architectural and historic integrity. Therefore, staff finds the building does not contribute to the historic neighborhood and that its demolition meets the design guidelines. So here's an image of the front facade proposed for the new infill. Actually, let me go to the site plan first. The site is set between a historic house on the corner of Elkins and 43rd Avenue, which is the site on the south, and an undeveloped lot that extends to the corner of 44th Avenue, and that's on the upper portion of the site plan that you see in front of you. The proposed infill will meet all base zoning requirements for setbacks, and staff finds that the infill meets the historic context in terms of its orientation, width, depth, scale, and lot coverage. We'll go back to the front facade. The new infill will be 1.5 stories in height and a total of 32 feet, 6 inches tall. Staff finds the infill's height to meet the context of the historic neighborhood, where heights range from 23 feet to upwards of 37 feet tall. The structure will have a side gabled roof with a gabled front dormer, both of which will have a roof pitch of 10-12. The structure will be clad primarily in cement fiberboard with wood brackets and trim, and with hardy shake accents in the dormers, gable fields, and side bays. The foundation will be split-face concrete block, and the roof will be asphalt shingle. The windows would be clad wood. The chimney will be split-face concrete block or stucco. Staff finds the proposed materials appropriate with the conditions that staff review and approve the final material choices and colors prior to their purchase and installation. Sorry, there's repeat slides. So here is an image of the rear facade. And then here are images of the two side facades. Staff finds that the infill's proportion and rhythm of openings meets the design guidelines. And then finally, here are some context photos. The picture on the upper left is the photograph of the neighboring historic house next door. And then the other two images are across the street, on the different corners of Elkins and 43rd Avenue. And then finally, here are some other historic buildings on Elkins Avenue in that same block across the street from the site. So in conclusion, staff recommends approval with the conditions that staff review the final material choices and color, any utilities be located in the rear of house or on the side facade beyond the midpoint of the house, and staff review any new landscape features, lighting, other aspects. And again, I'm happy to answer any questions, and the applicant is here if you have any questions for him.
Okay, any questions, staff?
I do have a question, staff. On the site plan, the setback to the front of the porch is noted at 34 feet 6, which looks just kind of in the middle of this may be a site plan or drawing issue. Is there any analysis of are the houses all generally in line? Are they kind of in and out, and this will fit in that? Or is this the one that's going to sit like 3 feet forward and look at a place just out of
Generally, we look at the ones particularly on that side of the street. So for this site, the only other house on the block is the one next door that you see on the map in front of you. So it sits, I believe, 3 feet in front of the house next door, but that's kind of the porch area. So staff found that setback to be appropriate and to meet the guidelines. The houses across the street, vary slightly, but are within that range.
And you'll find that I wouldn't probably paying attention if there's just a straight line and you have.
Right. No, there's no other houses on the rest of the block is vacant.
Thanks.
All right. Would the applicant like to say anything? Oh, same applicant? Okay. So are you okay also with the staff recommendations? Okay, close public hearing.
I move approval of 4302 Elkins Avenue.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Did you ask if there were any public comments at all? I just want to make sure
Maybe I missed that. Any public, anybody from the public want to talk? Okay, sorry. Close public hearing. Any discussion?
We have a motion.
Motion?
Second.
Okay. All right, motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. Okay, 1005 Seymour Avenue.
So 1005 Seymour Avenue is a vacant lot in the Greenwood Neighborhood Conservation Zoning Overlay. The lot has been vacant since 1994. The application is to construct new infill on the lot. The proposed new infill will meet all base zoning requirements for setbacks. Staff finds that the infill meets the historic context in terms of its orientation, width, depth, scale, and lot coverage. The site plan indicates that there is an existing curb cut that will be used to create a driveway that extends to the rear of the house. You can see it on the upper portion of the site plan in front of you. Because no hardscape driveway currently exists, staff asks that the driveway be concrete strips to at least the front wall of the house. In addition, the site plan does not show a central pathway leading from the sidewalk to the house, and staff asks that one be added. Sorry, let me go back to the front facade. The new infill will be 1.5 stories in height and a total of 28 feet, 6 inches tall. Although the majority of the houses in the neighborhood are 1 to 1.5 stories in height and between 20 and 24 feet tall, there are several 2 and 2.5 story houses with heights that range from 29 feet to 35 feet nearby in Seymour Avenue. Staff therefore finds that the height of the proposed new structure to meet the design guidelines. The structure will have a cross-gabled roof with a slope of 12-12. The structure will be primarily clad in cement fiberboard with cement fiberboard and battens accents in the dormer and gable fields. The foundation will be split-face concrete block, and the roof will be asphalt shingle. The materials for the windows and doors, as well as the porch floor and steps, were not indicated, and staff will want to approve these materials prior to their purchase. The front porch post will be wood, but the drawings indicate that they don't include a base and a cap, so staff will want to see a substantial base and cap to the front porch columns as a condition of approval. Staff finds the proposed materials appropriate with the conditions that staff review and approve the final material choices and specifications prior to their installation. So here is an image of the rear facade. And then you'll notice too that there is a rear porch post, and that also will need a cap and a base. And here are some of the context photos. The two houses on the top are the houses on either side of the lot. And then the houses on the bottom portion of the slide are across the street. So you can see that this house is taller than the ones like in that very, very immediate vicinity, but not too far away there are taller 2 to 2.5 story structures on Seymour Avenue. So therefore staff thought that the size of the house and the scale and the height was appropriate. So in conclusion, staff finds that the construction of the proposed infill meets the design guidelines with the following conditions. The front and rear porch columns have a cap and a base. Staff review final material choices and colors. The driveway be concrete strips to at least the front wall of the house. A central pathway leading from the sidewalk to the front porch be added. Any utilities be located in the rear of the house or on a side facade beyond the midpoint of the house. And staff review and approve any new appurtenances. So I don't believe that the applicant is here today.
Okay. Is the applicant okay, I guess, with the staff?
I believe that they are okay with the
Any other questions for staff? Okay. Thank you. Anybody in the audience like to speak about this particular project? Okay. Close public hearing. Discussion? Or motion?
Move approval based on staff recommendations.
Second? Sorry. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
I'm sorry. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, thank you. Okay, 3,000 Granny White Pike. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay.
3000 Granny White Pike is actually our office. And this project is to demolish the existing 1963 community center, which you see in the bottom right-hand corner, and construct a new community center with associated parking and vehicular entrance in the same general location at the corner of Clayton Avenue and Leland Lane. The period of significance for this site is roughly 1853 to 1930, which encompasses the time that Sunnyside was built, which is you see at the center and sort of at the top of the hill here. And this, when changes happened and when some of those accessory structures were constructed as well. The community center was constructed in 1963, well outside of the period of significance. Because the current community center does not contribute to the site's historical character, staff recommends approval of demolition as meeting Section 3B1 of the design guidelines. The site around the hilltop that includes Sunnyside and those historic accessory buildings has been significantly altered over the years. The original homestead began as 38 acres and it's now approximately 20, and of course the area has been used as a park and has many park-related structures. The new building will be, this is the existing building, the new building will be in the same general location as this current community center. Staff finds that adding a new community center in the far south portion of the park, well away from that collection of historic buildings, is appropriate and meets Section 2.1 and 2 of the design guidelines. Guideline 4 requires that the new building not detract from the landmark. In this case, the building is planned for an area, again, that's far away from the landmark and is actually behind it and down the hill. Guideline 3 requires that new construction not create a false sense of historic development, and the planned building is a contemporary design and therefore doesn't attempt to mimic the historic buildings. An archaeological study was conducted in the 1980s, and there's no evidence of archaeological features. And the construction, obviously, there's already been construction in this place in recent years, so it is not expected to conflict with the design guideline 2.6. Staff recommends approval of demolition of the current community center and construction of a new community center as the project meets all guidelines for demolition and new construction. And Rebecca Ratz with Parks, Metro Parks, formerly with Planning, and the architect are here if you have any questions.
Any questions to staff? Okay. Would the applicant like to anything? Okay. Okay, anybody in the audience would like to speak on or about this project? Okay, close public hearing. Discussion? Motion? Oh, please go ahead. Yes. Okay, thank you very much. Do I have a motion? Okay. I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Okay. Motion carries. Thank you very much. Now to the green stickers.
May I interrupt for just a second?
Sure.
Oh, sorry. If you would not mind restating your motion as to whether it was to approve or deny.
Restate my motion to make a motion to approve.
Okay. We understood. Okay. And do we have a second?
I second that.
Okay. Do we have to revote too? Okay. All revote? Yeah. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Okay. 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 Motion carries. Okay. Now to the green stickers.
Yes, now onto the green stickers. All right. This is for 3 extensions of Belmont Hillsborough, and you have them all collected into one staff recommendation, but I recommend that we take them each individually, discuss them individually, and take public comment and a vote individually. You have received a letter of support from the neighborhood organization. It was emailed to you yesterday, and I will start with Linden Avenue. You see some examples here. This is the 1200 and 1400 blocks of Linden. I don't say the 1300 block because that numbering actually skips that. It is mainly colonial revival and craftsman style bungalows constructed in the first half of the 20th century. 50% of the buildings are contributing to the historic character. This type of architecture is really just a continuation of what you already see in the existing Belmont Hillsborough neighborhood, and it meets section 17.36.120.A3 as they contain a significant amount of architecturally important buildings that embody the distinctive characteristics of their type and the period. Staff suggests that the Commission recommend to Metro Council that the Belmont Hillsborough Neighborhood Conservation Overlay be expanded to include approximately 1,200 and 1,400 blocks of Linden Avenue, and recommends that the Commission adopt the current design guidelines for the additional properties. And there, I believe, are property owners here who may wish to speak towards this.
Okay. Anyone would like to speak on behalf of this first part of it on the Linden Avenue contributing? Okay. Now, Robin, are you saying you want us to, should we vote on these? We're going to vote all at once, right?
I recommend that you vote separately.
Okay, I'm sorry. I wanted to make sure I understood that. Okay. So, no one from the public. I'll close public hearing on this one. Do we have any discussion amongst the commissioners? Okay.
I have a question
Yes.
before we go. Are these contiguous?
Yes.
Okay, do I have a motion?
I move approval, please, based on staff recommendation.
Do I have a second?
That's a motion to approve 1,200 and 1,400 blocks of Linden Avenue.
Correct.
Second.
Okay, all in favor? All opposed? Okay, motion carries.
And next, I'll take on Gale Lane. The 1,400 and 1,500 blocks of Gale Lane are to the east of Belmont Boulevard and Dead End and include I-440 right-of-way property. The homes are colonial revival and craftsman-style bungalows constructed in the first half of the 20th century. Again, very similar to the context that you already see in the existing boundaries. 68% of the buildings are contributing to the historic character. Staff recommends or suggests that the commission recommend to Metro Council that the Belmont Hillsborough Neighborhood Conservation Zoning Overlay be expanded to include approximately the 1,400 and 1,500 blocks of Gale Lane, and recommends that the commission adopt the current design guidelines for the additional properties.
Okay, anybody from the public like to speak? Okay, please state your name and your address.
I'm Berkeley Allen from 3521 Byron Avenue, council person for the 18th District, and would just like to, if I can, in general speak in support of all three of these at once. I was approached by the neighbors asking to expand the existing overlay. This area could easily have been included in the first go-around. There just weren't block captains available at that point to do the legwork of walking up and down the street. They've seen what a good thing it's been for the rest of the neighborhood and offered to do that work. They have knocked on every door. They have sent letters. They have had house meetings, and their support is very strong for this and for all three streets, Cedar, Gale, and Linden. And I would ask that you follow the staff recommendation and support all three of these overlay expansions. Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate you.
Chris.
Okay, any other comments? All right, I'll close public hearing. Any discussion? Motion?
Let me just clarify. I asked
Okay.
if they were contiguous, and I assume that means that they all touch, but it looks like there's one there and one there and one there. I mean, am I correct?
Oh, I'm sorry, I misunderstood you. The three extensions are not contiguous. I thought you were asking about the buildings within each. That's correct.
I just want to point out that I see now that they're separate.
All right. You want to do your motion there?
Well, I wasn't making them.
Oh, okay. All right. I was going to pull one out of you.
Which one are we?
We're motion on the Gale Lane
Well, I move
extension.
that we approve the classification of Gale Lane as part of the Belmont Hillsborough Neighborhood Conservation Zoning Overlay expansion.
Excellent. Have a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, thank you.
And last is Cedar Lane. And this is approximately from Hawthorne west to, again, including and up to the I-440 right-of-way property on that side. This one's a little bit different from the other two in terms of the historic context because it shows the later development of the neighborhood and includes mainly colonial revival and Tudor revival homes. 63% are contributing, and several of the ones that are non-contributing were built during the time of the others, but just have had some alterations. So they still somewhat fit in, but just are a little bit different. Staff suggests the commission recommend to Metro Council that Belmont Hillsborough Neighborhood Conservation Zoning Overlay be expanded to include approximately the 1,900 and 2,000 blocks of Cedar Lane, and recommends that the commission adopt the current design guidelines for the additional properties.
Okay, thank you, Robin. Anybody in the audience like to speak? Please come forward and state your name and your address. Name and address.
Hi, my name is Carol Kenner, and I appreciate an opportunity to come before you today. I live at 1901 Cedar Lane, and I bought the property 18 years ago. It's a wonderful street. It's slightly more historic than I am. Most of the properties there were developed between about 1932 and 1940, and so that gives you kind of a timeline for the properties. And there's such a wonderful mix of styles from that particular period. And I think it's really important that we work to maintain those styles, because on our street in the past year, we've already lost one house. The second house is getting ready to come down. Both were fairly contributing to the fabric of the neighborhood. And with that neighborhood being probably, and that street in particular being one of the hottest streets in the Beaumont-Hillsborough neighborhood, houses are going to keep on coming down if we don't put something in place that's going to keep that from happening. So we appreciate your looking at this and thinking about it, and hope that you will make the decision to keep this around for another 60 or 70 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, I'll close the public hearing. Any discussion? Or motion?
Move approval of the approximately 1,900, 2,000 blocks of Cedar Lane to the Beaumont-Hillsborough Neighborhood Conservation zoning overlay.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, all opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you very much. Appreciate you all's support.
Mr. Chair, I was distracted. I vote aye in the affirmative to that motion if it's needed.
Okay.
To clarify.
I think I'll make it.
I'm a little late to the game. Sorry about that.
I think we have a duplex.
Yes. I'll give it just a
duplex
couple of minutes.
thing for?
Let the room clear.
If you guys don't mind, we have one more order of business we need to do. I'm sorry. We appreciate your support, and thank you very much for everything and your green stickers. But we need to do one more order of business. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Next on the agenda is duplex policy. The MHCC has started working on a change to I'll just give it a
I'm
minute.
sorry.
Sorry to keep you waiting. Next is a duplex policy. As you know, the ordinance allows for you to make certain changes to the bulk zoning. Mostly it's setback reductions. So we started looking at, is there also a way to use that ordinance to allow for detached duplexes? In those areas that allow for duplexes, they have to be attached, and that has created some awkward buildings. So we are looking at that, but before we open that door, we'd like to have a policy in place for how to deal with that. And so this is a first draft of that policy. Staff recommends adopting this policy that you have in your packets. The suggested policy came from researching existing conditions in the current overlays and how duplexes have developed historically. We took 3 different approaches based on the location or the size of the lot. On most lots, the preferred method would be the attached side by side, like you see in these 2 examples. That's what you see historically. The majority of the time, that's how new duplexes should look. However, there may be cases that allow for different types of scenarios. And so the policy would require that at any time there is a lot that's big enough that it could legally be subdivided so that 2 different structures could be constructed, then that's what should happen. And that's likely what any developer is going to want to happen. There may be cases, though, where there are lots that are a little bit wider than the context and could take 2 homes side by side that meet the design guidelines, meet the rhythm of the street, but there isn't enough property to subdivide. So that is one way that this policy would allow for 2 buildings side by side on one piece of property that's technically a duplex but not attached. And those would have to follow the existing design guidelines. Another possibility that you already have in place, a tool that's already in place, are the detached accessory dwelling units. And that's for a very small building behind an existing building. And I do want to point out before I go forward, this is not changing the use. So this would only be usable in those areas that are already zoned for multifamily. So it's not allowing for multifamily where it is not already allowed. So I wanted to make that point clear. So the real biggie of this is probably the corner lots. And, we saw one of those recently, or two of those come forward to you recently. For a corner lot, the policy would require that the second building that's behind the primary building, facing the primary street, be subordinate in terms of height, massing, and footprint to that primary building. The policy further outlines details on garages, orientation of the homes, location on the lot, and vehicular access. And so we recommend approval of that policy unless you feel that there may be some additional research needed or some additional changes taking place.
Was there any look at any other municipalities too, like how they treat duplexes? Is this something or did we kind of look at just Nashville?
We just looked at Nashville because the condition that duplexes be attached in the manner that they are here, and our historic development are unique to us. So we just looked at how it works here and how we would want it to look here.
Robin, on a corner lot, bottom of page 5, is that an example of a corner lot, or is that an example of a block? I guess that's a corner lot. You divided into two parcels. Is that what you've done? Lower left of page 5?
718 Baldwin?
Yes.
That was what was originally, and these are historic examples.
Okay.
Actually,
if you had a corner lot, I'm trying to think.
So that was originally, both of those were originally one lot. And
Okay.
at some point in history, someone built a second house behind. And so at that time, it was subdivided. There's probably not enough land there to legally subdivide that lot now, but that was what would happen. That's what happened earlier.
And where would you have the vehicular egress into the subordinate structure? Does it?
It will depend
on
whether or not there's an alley.
Okay.
So as much as possible, we're recommending that the vehicular access be from an alley, and where an alley doesn't exist, then a driveway could be added.
Well, you may have already said it there. Where is the criteria to make sure that we are specific on what is enough square footage to legally do it? Is that?
Oh, well, now that's part of zoning, and we're not recommending changing that.
So if there was an alley, I'm just hypothetical here, and they wanted to build a duplex, and if it was a single structure home, then we would have, well, not necessarily had access from the alley. So you would have access from the front street and access from the alley. Okay. Never mind.
In our R6, Fatherland Street and Edgefield, are duplexes, I'm not familiar enough with the zoning code to know if duplexes are permitted in that zone.
I believe they are, but I would need to look at the individual properties to
The
tell
reason
you.
I ask that question is I know there's some I forget what it is, that is, most of Germantown's MUN, and I'm more familiar with that. And there's one street that's not. And MUN is much more permissive for multiple buildings on a site and occupant, two-family dwelling units. But I do know that the part that was zoned not MUN is kind of opted out is, every one of those lots is non-conforming. It's like the lot size is like 10,000 square feet. And so those are even non-conforming for a single-family house on them in that zone in particular. And I wonder if we're, as a commission, if we're being hamstrung by that, if this is doing anything, and I know by law we're bound by the base zoning. I just is the efficacy of doing this going to apply hopefully to the cases where we'd like to not have a less desirable condition? And you can't see into the future, but I'm just curious about that from how many of our zones are, because the zoning code was not necessarily written for in-town neighborhoods. It was more so written for later types of development and lot sizes.
And that's exactly right. And with the success of our historic overlays, and that brings in development pressures, and if someone's allowed to have 2 units on a piece of property, then they want to have 2 units on that piece of property. So we would like a way to control that in a way that matches the historic context. Is that?
Yes.
If I could just ask quickly, I know in recent years, last 5, 6, 7, 8 years, there's been a lot of property was rezoned basically, and massive rezonings by council people that took out a lot of the R property, which I assume would be where some of these rental dwellings could be built. Do we have an idea how much property is left? Because I know a lot of it was in some of these areas we looked at today. How many pieces of R property we have in historic overlays where side-by-side rental dwellings could be put in?
How many pieces? No, I don't know. But this would be fairly, it sounds like we may be opening the door to doing a lot, but if you think about it, the side-by-side is only going to be allowed on those properties that, the side-by-side detached, is only going to be allowed on those properties that are unusually wide. And those one behind another is really only going to be allowed on corner properties. So that cuts down where this can happen quite a bit.
Yeah, I just think it'd be interesting to know really how many pieces of property we're talking about that exist in some of these, because a lot of it was taken out in recent years. But
yeah, I can tell you that it will not, that the districts that don't have that zoning at all are Belmead Links Triangle, Elmington Place, Hillsborough West End, Park and Elkins, Richland West End, and Tanglewood. So it won't apply to every single one of our overlays.
Okay. So we need to vote on this to...
If you would like, if you feel that's appropriate, or we can go back to the drawing board. But this is based on a good bit of research of how duplexes have historically developed in the neighborhood.
Okay. Do we have any discussion? I think it's a good direction personally, but...
Well, I think, at least in reading of it, it certainly doesn't lend, or there's not an encouragement or a forcing into doing two where, a single wider lot where two front-facing would be a more appropriate solution. I think it kind of spells out in here the path and the decision tree that one would follow, or at least a place where staff could have an applicant start so we don't see this rush of, hey, cut off the back of my lot and build a house yourself.
Yeah. I've seen it seem to potentially abused in other areas. So I like the direction. But anyway, do we have a motion?
I move approval.
Second.
Second. My other comment would be is if there is an adverse reaction to it, or we start seeing those kinds of things, I think we could always amend it so that we, respond to that.
And this is a recommendation to council.
No, this is just a policy. This is just our own policy. So there's a lot of flexibility for change here.
Yeah.
And this, I doubt this will be the end all be all. I'm sure that we'll work on it and tweak on it. And it is just a policy.
Okay.
I mean, the zoning's already there.
Right, you can affect that.
Okay, that's okay. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? All right, motion carries to move forward with our policy for duplex criteria. Any other business?
If I may, I would just like to remind you about the Tennessee Preservation Trust Conference that's coming up May 31st through June 2nd. The main sessions will be at the Hotel Indigo. As a part of that on Thursday, I hope you can all come and that you have already signed up on TPT's website to come to camp. That's Commissioners Assistance Mentoring Program. That's given by the National Alliance of Preservation Commissions, which does this nationally, so we're really very fortunate to have them here. This is a lot of fun, and it's day-long training, and it's incredibly helpful. It has been to me. And if you just want to go to Norfolk in July, the NAPC Forum, their biennial conference, will be happening July 18th through 22nd.
All right.
So how do we sign up?
Tennessee Preservation Trust website, TennesseePreservationTrust.org.
All right. Thank you very much.
If you have trouble, call and they'll walk you right through it, because I know the button that I pressed wouldn't get me there. So there's no cost, but it's a little circuitous.
Meeting adjourned.